do I think that this speech is going to suddenly transform Donald Trump's quite difficult ratings right now? Probably not.
And Katy Balls joins me now. Good morning.
Morning.
What, Katy, is the biggest takeaway for you from what Donald Trump said?
So I think it was naturally a political address because this is Donald Trump looking ahead to the midterms in November. And therefore, we looked at what he was saying. And I think the big focuses that he was trying to focus on, as broad ranging as a very long speech would be, were the economy and immigration, and trying to draw lines against the Democrats in an unfavorable fashion. And that was the thrust of what he was talking about. There are lots of things to add, but I think it really set out the battleground ahead of the elections later this year.
And there were some interesting parts about tariffs replacing income tax, which is not likely to happen, is it?
I mean, it seems unlikely, not least because if we think about the levers Donald Trump has to pull on tariffs, they've been reduced in the past week. Now, he still has some things he can do. And we heard that on Friday when he spoke before the White House press briefing room, saying, oh, they say I can't do X, but actually I can, embargo trade. I can do certain things. The 15% tariff, for example, that he announced. But that has a 150-day limit unless you have Congress's approval. And I think there, the elephant in the room is that on current polling, most Democrats and most Republicans believe that Republicans are on course to lose the House, which means he's going to have a lot less wriggle room. So yes, there are still things you can do in executive power, but he doesn't have quite the hand of cards that he had when he first returned to the White House.
And it felt like to me, listening to Donald Trump, that ran through a lot of the speech. I mean, there were a number of moments where he called for the whole House to stand. He almost baited the Democrats when they didn't stand up and applaud. And there were chants of USA, USA. How normal is that?
Well, I think there's always some pantomime to these proceedings. I mean, speaking from my own experience, this is the first State of the Union I've been in the US for. But I think if we look historically, that there is a sense of theatre to it. Is also Donald Trump. I would actually say he was a slightly more restrained Donald Trump from some of the things we have seen before. So, for example, on Friday, when he was talking about that tariffs ruling, he was really lashing out against the justices that had ruled against him, against Republicans who are not sufficiently on side. Now, he wasn't praiseworthy of them tonight, but he was a little bit more restrained. He was talking about how he was disappointed. I think there was an effort to be statesmanlike at times. Some will watch it and say that is not how we would describe Donald Trump. But by Donald Trump standards, I think there was less lashing out than we have seen on certain other appearances. And there was an attempt to be disciplined in terms of that message, the economy, immigration, what message do they want to give to voters. And as a result, for a president that has spent a lot of time on international, which did come up, this was an address that was aiming to be more in the domestic.
You mentioned that international affairs did come up. He gave a passing reference to the war in Ukraine. We obviously marked the 4 year anniversary of the full scale invasion yesterday. He also mentioned Iran. What should we make of where America is right now in terms of action in Iran?
I think what's tricky is, of course, this has been going on for a long time, but more recently, since the protest in Iran, when you had Donald Trump tweeting, "We're with you," suggesting help was coming, and then lots of the expectation was that help would be some type of strike, military intervention, and it didn't come to pass. And he said that's because, oh, well, they stopped the executions, so he got what he wanted. Now you have the biggest build-up of military air force since 2003, and there is a sense, is he going to move? And therefore, I think there's just a bit of a sense of how much is this bravado, how much of this is trying to put pressure on, and how much should we take it that serious action could be imminent. And for now, it's still hard to say. I mean, even he spoke about it in the speech, but even ahead of that, he had a lunch with heads of broadcast today at the White House. And one of the messages was he was saying, well, Iran wants a deal more than the US does, but they still won't say the words I need to hear them say when it comes to nuclear. So it feels as though there's still some way to go, but ultimately, there is still a sense that the president is looking to negotiation first and will be looking to the people he trusts a lot. So that would be Jared Kushner, who was present tonight,
Mm.
his son-in-law, Stephen Witkoff, his peace envoy and old friend of his, who was also obviously present. And what do they think in terms of the negotiations they're looking in and reporting back to the president?
You mentioned some of the key figures around the president, and some of them we saw if people watched that address on television. Who wrote the speech tonight? Do we know?
So there's been some reports about speechwriters. So one has been reported on about how they helped Donald Trump with his speeches. But when it comes to the exact wording of tonight, I don't think we're completely clear. And also the president does have a tendency to go off script. He will have an autocue a lot of the time, but he will deviate. If you think about the moments of the ice hockey players this evening where they came into the balcony and he had he talked about medals and awards. Some of it seemed off the cuff, but of course, the thrust of the speech, it won't just be a speechwriter. That is decided by a group of advisors along with the president in terms of what they want to focus on and what they think the main message is. And I think from tonight, it has been the case for a while that senior figures in the White House want the president to talk more about domestic issues and the economy. They think that the economic indicators are going in their direction, and that's not quite landing with the public yet. Members of the public can feel as though Trump is almost falling into the trap of Biden by saying the economy is going gangbusters and voters at home aren't feeling that. So therefore, how do you get around that? And I think that has been one of the factors when you think to members in the president's inner circle ahead of the speech. So I think it's a group effort as to how exactly it appears.
And do you think it will go down well with the people who were looking for him to refocus?
So I was doing an appearance ahead of the speech, which was on Mark Halpin's two-way show, which is often where you get an interaction. So people watch it and will say what they want to see. And one of the main feedback we got there with Americans watching was that they didn't expect Trump to say that everything was perfect because it's not perfect. What they wanted was the president to level with them and say, look, things aren't great now, but here are the reasons you have for optimism. Here's why, although you might feel that right now you have more money in your pocket, I believe you're going to have it in this amount of time and things might be better than they were 2 years ago. And just a sense of realism and honesty. So I think there was a little bit of that. Do I think that this speech is going to suddenly transform Donald Trump's quite difficult ratings right now? Probably not. But has it set the markers in the sand or in the ground, so they're more permanent perhaps? But has it given an indication of how they want to move to fighting for the midterms? And I think we have at least the indications of that. I think it's too soon to say whether they're going to be successful or a failure, but certainly we have the outlines of the areas where the Republicans feel they have a fighting chance against the Democrats. And I would just add to that, we also just heard in the last half an hour from the Democratic official response, which was Abigail Spanberger, who won the governor of Virginia race recently. And it was interesting how she just hammered home affordability, cost of living, which is how the Democrats think they made those wins in the first place. So they know where they want to hit Donald Trump. And it's also where Donald Trump's trying to come back and say, listen to me again. And that is the space we're fighting on for November, I think.